welcome. We're just going to give it one more minute. Please do open your chat and give us a hello and whereabouts in the world that you are, whether you're South, North, Midlands. Give us a hi and let us know where you are so we can say hello back to you. If you haven't used Zoom before, if you just hover over the bottom of your screen or the top of your screen, you should see the little chat function and you should be able to open that. We'll be using that as a way to say hello and ask questions. Hello, Gemma from Music for Wellbeing in Kent. How's Kent today? Is the sun shining, Gemma? It's quite nice here in Surrey. Falkirk in Scotland. Dare I ask, Carol, what is the weather like in Scotland? Do you have the sun as well?
No.
Hello, Kate from the neighbourhood. Bristol Association for Neighbourhood Care. I'm off to Bristol straight after this, so you'll see me shoot off a little bit early. So apologies for that, but we've got the other happiness funders on the call who will take over. Hi, Joe in Wimbledon, just down the road from me. We've got a sunny day here. Fleetwood near Blackpool. How's Blackpool? One of my favourite places. Have they still got the trams up there? I used to love the slot machines. How's it going up in Blackpool, Steve?
Oh, good. Yeah, still got the slot machines.
But I'll be up. I'm sure I'm owed a few quid. I nudged them over the years. I know that's not allowed, but hello, Beatrice in Plymouth, gorgeously sunny. Hi, Lynn. Croydon, the big local broad. So if you've just joined, welcome. We're just going to give it a few minutes because we're still letting some people in. If you haven't already, please do open your chat function because we will be using that as a way for you to ask questions and interact. And if you haven't already, give me a hello and whereabouts in the world that you are, just so I can give you a shout out as well. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining on this quite sunny, surprisingly sunny, should I say, for March afternoon. So I hope it's sunny where you are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a start because we are just coming up to 3 minutes past, and I will hand over to the brilliant Steph Wilkinson. There's two Stephs here. I'm Stephanie Davis. I'll hand over to Stephanie Wilkinson, who some of you might know already. Over to you, Steph.
Taking all my lines away. Hi, everybody. As Stephanie said, I am better known as Steph W, and I deal with all the processing of the application form. So if you've ever applied before or you've emailed, it will be me that you've had a response from, Steph W. So that's me. And I am going to hand back to Steph because she does have to dash off. She wasn't supposed to be here on the webinar today, but luckily we've managed to grab her for a few minutes, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the Happiness Fund, why she started it and what she hopes it does do for communities.
So, hello everybody again. My name's Stephanie as well, not Stephanie as well, that's a silly name. It's Stephanie Davis, and I am the head of happiness here at Laughology. Laughology, some of you might know us, some of you might just know us as the Happiness Fund. So, Laughology, we are a learning and culture company. So, we work in small and big organisations like your HSBCs of this world, but also smaller organisations and schools, looking at how we help people to think differently and learn differently through the power of humour and laughter. Why do I call myself the head of happiness? It's a made-up title. Any of you got a made-up title? I'm sure some of you have got made-up titles. If you want to make one up today, we can help you with that as well. So my background's a little bit different. I started out doing stand-up comedy. I'm also a psychologist as well. How do those two things mix? So when I started out in stand-up comedy, the reason why I got into that is because I didn't do very well at school. So I was suspended twice, expelled once. I am from Liverpool originally, so if we've got any Scousers on the call, you'll know that being suspended in Liverpool is quite a high bar. So I'm quite proud of that. But the reason for that is I'm dyslexic and also ADHD, and that wasn't identified at school. So I was held back a year. I was put in the bottom set. And I had just one person that saw something different in me, helped me get into performing arts. I had a performing arts tutor that got me into performing arts school. That's where it was identified I was dyslexic, and it changed my world and changed my life. I'm absolutely passionate about the arts for that reason, because comedy helped me to learn to read and write. I never wanted anyone to go through what I went through at school. So I took stand up into schools at first to help young people with their reading and writing skills, and realised that I love seeing the light go on in people's eyes who have kind of given up on themselves a little bit. And so that's where my passion started. And I remember all those years ago, you're talking 25 years ago, I applied to the local education authority in Liverpool for a small grant. And I was given that grant, and that's what helped me start the stand-up comedy lessons in schools. And hopefully I changed a few people's or young people's thought processes, just made them think differently. So I set up Laughology a few years later and started working in schools and in the corporate world, looking at how learning can be done in a different way, not in this rote kind of learning way, but through fun. And that's what Laughology is. And I'm still running it now. We work in some of the biggest organizations in the world. So that teacher who said to me, I'll never make anything of myself, who's laughing now? And the reason why I do the Happiness Fund is for that very reason. I know that it's those grassroots, little smaller organizations, smaller charities, communities that have the biggest impact on people's lives. And what my passion was to build Laughology up to a point where we could give that money away, where I could help other people who helped me. So that's why I set up the Happiness Fund. And my plan is for it to go from strength to strength. I don't just do it by myself. In fact, I don't do anything anymore. I don't do any of the work. You've got the brilliant people who do the work on this call. So I'm going to introduce them briefly. You've got Shelley Jacobs, if you want to shout hello and give us a wave, Shelley. Who's what I'm calling her today one of our happiness rebels. I have just made that up today, but she's one of our happiness rebels. What does that mean? So Shelley is from a different organisation, and she gives her time voluntarily, is that a word? It is now, to help us sift through all the funds, the applications that we get. Another one of our happiness rebels is the brilliant Chris Fraser-Lewis, if you give us a wave. Chris, who also sifts through all the funds. You've got Selena, who's our lead inclusion facilitator here at Laughology. And then the brilliant Steph W, who you saw there, who manages the whole process. And then you've got Curtis on the call there, who's our comms and marketing person. And we do get thousands of applications. We're a tiny, tiny company, and we get thousands of applications. So what I would say is we can't answer all the questions directly, which is why we started doing this. And I know some of you do email us and ask us questions and email Laughology, but Laughology as a company aren't allowed to answer any of those questions, just so you know, because it's about us being true to our interest fund, and because we do give a lot of money away. So we have a strict process where we don't allow any of our Laughology team to answer those questions directly. So hopefully we're going to put on these webinars, it was a request from some of you to answer some of your questions, and hopefully that will help with some of the things that you need to know going forward. So please do put your questions in chat as we go along, and hopefully we'll get to them as we go through. But who I wanted to introduce was a wonderful lady. Is she on the call? I just see her. From Loch Gellibrand, who won our Happiness Fund in 2023, just to talk through with you about her application, the impact that it's had, and basically what Lindsay and the team did to make that happen. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And can I just check everybody can hear me all right? Good, perfect. So yeah, delighted to come on. Loch Gellibrand were the successful recipient of the Happiness Fund for 2023. Anyone from the team will tell you that I could talk about fundraising and my band for hours and hours, but you'll be glad to know I'm not in a position to do that this afternoon. We have a huge rehearsal this evening in front of a huge contest this weekend, so I will keep it short and sweet. So a little bit about Lochgelly Band. We're an amateur brass band. We are a registered charity and we are based in Fife in Scotland. In 2020, we commenced what we see and still see as a 5-year project to regenerate our music hall. And when we started this project, it was with a view to growing what we do as an organisation. So not just being a brass band who does a couple of gala days and a couple of competitions a year. We wanted to grow the organisation and we wanted to launch a youth / community learning organisation through which we would be able to provide tuition, group tuition, small group tuition, one-to-one tuition, as well as things like the loan of an instrument, learning materials, tutor books, polo shirts. We wanted to launch a new organisation, but to give you an idea, a single brass instrument can cost upwards of £1,000, and in a full band, you have in the region of 27 brass instruments. So halfway through our project to regenerate our music hall, we started to look for funders that we felt would or had a synergy with the band in terms of why we wanted to launch this project. And for us, it was very much a mental health and wellbeing project to launch a community band. Lochgelly is officially one of the most deprived areas of the UK, accessing music and instrumental tuition has historically not been the easiest. In all communities, we still have authorities who charge for tuition. We have authorities that didn't charge before but do now, and the cost of learning an instrument at school can range from £100 every 3 months to £400 just for an instrument, plus £90 a month for lessons. So it was a big deal for us to be able to launch an organisation that would share our music making with people in the community that couldn't access it elsewhere. So what we did was we put together a plan for launching a community band, and we looked for a funder who had the same objectives and aims that we did as an organisation, tackling issues of social isolation, loneliness, inclusion, skills development, and playing our part in giving back. I mean, Lochgelly Band itself was 170 years old last year, and it was always our aim that when we got to 2024, that would be the year that we launched a youth band. And actually, in about a week's time, that youth band is a year old. And the funding that we secured from Lafology and the Happiness Fund, we used to purchase a set of student brass instruments to kick it all off. So we kicked off our community band in March of 2024. That community band is thriving, it is growing. We also since launched a percussion ensemble, so we now have 2 additional music groups. We also have a daytime brass band for people who are unable to access the music in the evenings, so stay-at-home mums, work from home, retired musicians, to increase accessibility to music. But it all started from the launch of our community band, which was, I can't believe it was nearly a year ago. In terms of the process, once we identified, obviously, Lithology as a potential match, that, you know, what do I feel that we did well? We picked a funder that we knew was on the same page and would understand our story. We got a lot of support from our community, so we did a research. We identified that there was a need within our local community for not just a music initiative, but a kind of well-being. Social isolation, you know, it is a big deal in our community. We are from an ex-mining community, so it was important for the band to give back. So we spent a lot of time with the community, enlisting their support, making sure there was actually a need and an interest in what we wanted to do. We had supporting organisations, we had referees. I believe we did have, and we do have, and we continue to have a really good story to tell, which I think is so important. A lot of people find fundraising daunting, but it's something that for us, you know, we just followed every process that we knew we should, and we did all of our due diligence to get through the process. We leaned on the team, we met online. It wasn't, you know, we weren't all bogged down in paperwork. We spoke in person. We presented why Lochillie Band were doing what we do, and we were selected, you know, and equally importantly, we did what we said we were going to do. And as soon as we did, we shouted about it, and we said thank you. And the process itself, I find was pretty different to a kind of standard fundraising process. We found it accessible, we found it modern. It's quite funky to meet with a funder online and talk about your organisation, because sometimes that's the best way to get your point across, is to actually get that opportunity, which we've had with funders before, but the majority of the time it's filling in forms and submitting documents, which we still had to do, but the process was made a lot nicer by actually meeting the people that we were asking to support us. You know, very straightforward, quite an enjoyable process, and we were able to give. I don't know if you've seen the video the guys posted the other week. We made a thank you video of the Happy song from the Minions, just as a little nod. But we continue to be grateful. Our organisation is thriving, it's growing, but we did what we set out to do with the support of Lithology, which was just, we'll always be grateful.
Lindsay, if you don't mind me jumping in just before I go, just to pick up on a few things that Lindsay said there that she did brilliantly, then I'm going to hand over to Selena, who's going to manage some of the questions. So do keep them coming in chat. I've seen a couple coming. First of all, 174. You're not 174, are you, Lindsay? Or you look blooming good for it.
No. Yeah. Early 40s.
So the band is 174. It had a history. Now, we don't expect people to have a history. Actually, some of the funding that we've done is for really new, really fresh charities or organisations that are coming through. But what Lindsay did really well is she was very specific about what the funding was for, but also shows the ongoing impact of that funding. So it wasn't just it was going to do a small bit over here. Lindsay, in her application, talked about what ongoing activities that they were going to do, what they already had in place, and a real long-term plan about how that would be sustained, that the funding wouldn't just be a one-off payment for something, and that's really important. So the specifics were important. It was going for these young people's instruments, and the sustainability of that. And then Lindsay also costed the specifics and showed where those costs came from. And particularly when we met her, the presentation was brilliant. I think where we've had people put in a really good application with those specifics, and what Lindsay talked about there is the backing that she put in that application was about why the community wants this, not just I think the community wants this, the research that she'd done into that and the impact it's had on mental health before. So really clear, helping us to understand that. She also put that in her presentation, because sometimes we've got a really good application and then people don't present to us in a good way. And I'm not saying that everyone should be presenters, because we don't expect that, but just knowing your numbers a little bit is really important to us, because we are giving over money to you, and we want to know that that's going to go into something that's going to be used really, really well. But also, us knowing that you've done your research around some of that. For example, we had one recently where they wanted the funding for something specific in the building that they were in to make that building more accessible. They didn't own the building. So when we asked the question, have they asked the owners of the building? They didn't have that information up front. So things like that, just being really thoughtful. And what I'd encourage you to do is lean on other people, share your application with them first, because we all have blind spots in our thinking. Not all of us are that detailed. I certainly am not. So use other people to have a look at your application, who you know who can support you, and ask where those blind spots are. But I'm going to hand over to Selena, because I have to run for a train. But it's been lovely seeing you all. A huge thank you for the brilliant work that you do. And you do make a difference, because you've got young people, old people, people who need you in your communities, and you are at the heart of that. So a huge thank you. Over to you, Selena.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Steph. Steph, did you want to say something as well? The other Steph.
Me? No, I think I did have something in my head, and now it's gone. So no, we'll go straight to the questions, because I think obviously there's a lot of people that want to ask questions. So the more time we have, the better.
Exactly. So the first question we have from Gemma, and she says we provide singing activity sessions for people with life challenges in older age, aiming to improve well-being and happiness and to promote inclusion. Would you recommend we go for mental health, well-being and happiness, or inclusion? Who would like to answer that? Steph, do you want to answer that?
Either or. That's what I'd
Yeah.
say. What would
Yeah.
we say to anybody that does inquire with us, whether they should apply or not? As Steph said, because I just process them and I'm not part of choosing, my advice always is to just apply. What have you got to lose? And if Lindsay doesn't mind me saying, because I'm going to say it, Lindsay, as Steph said, her application was absolutely superb, but on her first one and her presentation, but she wasn't successful. But it didn't put her off. She reapplied, and then she got through. So if you don't get through, then do look at your application form. We do it twice. This is what I was going to say. We do it twice a year. Originally, when we'd started, the fund was 2,500 twice a year, but we've actually now made, or 4 times a year, we've actually made it now 5,000 twice a year. And next year is Laphology's 20 years. So we are thinking of doing maybe a bigger fund for our 20th year. So what I would say is apply. You've got absolutely nothing to lose, but fill out the detail as much as you can. Sometimes we do get forms saying we want it for, and maybe it's paints and paper. We really need to know why you need it, what impact it's going to have, and how you're going to continue to fund something once you've started it. Because if we, and I know one of the questions that has come up is that we don't fund rent, accommodation, expenses, because we want the money to be invested so that everybody can enjoy it. And once you've paid the rent, that's gone. So we would ask the question, how are you going to pay the next rent that comes along? So we want something that is sustainable. But going back to your question, yes, apply. It's always worth applying.
Thank you, Steph. And to answer the next question that Gemma had, is how many applicants do you normally get and how many of these are successful? I believe Steph had mentioned just before she got off the call, and do correct me if I'm wrong, Steph, that like it's over 1,000, because you look at the applications to begin with. So there's loads, and there's only a few of us, and a few of us are only looking at certain stages. So you're the one that sees all of them coming in.
So we do get hundreds. And as Steph said, I am Steph's assistant, so my job is full-time assistant, and part of that role twice a year is to go through and print, obviously, and process the application forms. Do you know, I've completely forgotten what I'm waffling on about.
No, you
So
you answered the question.
Sorry, so we do get a lot. What I do try to do, if I have the time, is I try to give it a quick glance, and if somebody there's a tick box before you start to say that you agree with everything. And what we are finding is that people are ticking to say, I don't do any of the above, and that's like expenses, rent, accommodation costs, paying staff. If I have the time, I will send it back and say, sorry, you don't meet the criteria, because we state that at the top, and we're finding a lot of people are ticking, and then when they fill out the form, they're actually including expenses, rent, accommodation. So I will try and respond to that. But yes, we do get lots and lots. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, it's a
And sorry, what percentage is successful, would you say, out of those
Sorry,
100?
successful. So we narrow it down to maybe like the first phase, and maybe it depends. If they're all really good, then, you know, if it was 50, we'd narrow it down to the 50, then we'd go back through it again, we'd pass it on to Shelley, Chris and Selena, and Steph obviously has a pre-look as well. And then we try and look for the best ones out of that. I mean, if we have to interview 10 people, we'll interview 10 of the projects, 10 of the people. But I have to say, it never seems to get that many, because people aren't very good at filling out the forms with what we need.
Yeah.
But we do try to narrow it down 10 or below that get to final interview stage. And we have had some that have been absolutely brilliant. And then something has just picked them to the post. So we always say, look, apply again, as did Lindsay.
And then is there just one winner at the end?
One winner.
Just one
twice
winner.
a year.
Yeah.
Twice a year. Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, if we just keep, because I'm conscious of time and we've only got like 20 minutes, if we just put our questions in the chat. So then just, I'm seeing another question here. Do you only fund new groups and activities? And I believe both of the Stephs have said it doesn't matter how long the project has been going on, you can put that fund in. Another question here, I can't see you fund salaries, accommodation or rent, as well as project funding. Can we put in a little budget for core funding, such as insurances, telephone costs? Shall I open that up to Steph or Shelley or Chris? One of you, do you want to answer that?
I'll answer that. I think, you know, as it's already been mentioned, what we're really looking for is something specific that is sustainable. So things like telephone costs, you know, that's not really what we're looking for. We want to invest that money in something specific, that specific funding will then be used over and over again. So that's really what we're looking for when we're going through the applications.
Thank you, Shelley. And we've got a question here about funding, whether they can apply for funding for next year. And we'd say if you put in a funding for the Happiness Fund, and then I believe the decisions come out in June, is that we'd ask for the funds to be used ASAP, not to be held onto and kept for another funding cycle. Colin, we're a mental health community charity. Would you consider a project aimed at a peer support project for people who have lived experience of the care system? Chris, would you like to answer that?
Sorry, I completely missed that question.
That's okay. No doubt. My monotone voice, wasn't it? No, it says we're a mental health community charity. Would you consider a project aimed at a peer support project for people who have lived experience of the care system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had some other applications along the same lines in the past. It's absolutely in line with Lathology's aims and values. I think the thing with that is to consider the peer-to-peer aspect and actually what your costs are that you're going to be covering. So, for example, just referring back to Lochgelly Band, you know, they've got their premises and they've got their people who are volunteers. So they've kind of got that teaching element there, and then the instruments were what they needed to fulfill that with the time of the people who are working with them. So I think I would just say when it comes to your application and your funding grant, make it really clear as to what your setup is, so that when we're reading the application, we get a really clear picture as to, okay, so this is where these people meet, this is who is going to actually provide the service, and what the money is actually going to be used for. Just so we've got a really clear picture as to how the funding will help you provide that.
Thank you, Chris. That's really clear. I think from what everyone has said here on the call today, it's about being as clear as possible, because we have no knowledge about what your organisation charity does. So if we can read it and instantly understand everything you're talking about it from the financial cost breakdown, it makes our lives 1,000 times easier. And then a question from Kate: does a charity income make a difference to the grant decision? I'll quickly answer that. No, it doesn't make a difference. We're not at all. And also, what sort of reporting is required? Steph, do you want to quickly give a breakdown of
Yeah,
that?
that would be if you got through to the final interviews. We some people come and they have a presentation that explain to us money coming in, money going out, and actually we do have a limit. If your income exceeds 50,000 in a particular year, then we wouldn't consider it. But if you've, say, got 45,000 in the bank, we would consider it. It all really does play very heavily on your application form.
Thank you, Steph. And a question here from David from Livingston Community Shed in Scotland, and says that we are looking to fund a mains electric connection for our shed. Would this qualify for funding? I can open that up to anybody. Would anyone like to answer that? Shelley? Yeah.
We would need to sort of look at the specifics. Again, we mentioned there was a project previously that had some implications around the sort of structure of the building, and did they have permission to do that? So there's nothing sort of off the table as long as it sort of covers the points that we've already raised. And it's about being very clear on, is there permission to put in an electrical supply? What would the benefit of it be? Do you have permission to do that? And so on and so forth.
Thank you, Shelley. And we've got a question here from Carol. It says, we're looking to expand a current programme of delivery. I'm assuming, I don't know what that acronym is for. I'm assuming it's for into another prison. Do you fund prison projects? Chris, would you like to answer, or Steph or Shelley?
We haven't so far.
Yeah.
We've not had an application like that before, so I can't say yes for certain, just because I don't know entirely what that entails or what the red tape around that could or might be. But I would certainly be interested to receive an application so we can find out more about it.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's worth, Carol, you contacting us separately. But you can put in an application form, because it would again depend, as Chris mentioned, exactly what it was being used for. We have projects that are delivered by project staff. Can those salaries be included in a bid? That's a few. Marmalade Trust. We don't fund salaries, not at all, just to let you know. Yeah. Can you include delivery fees? So for participatory artists, for example, Catherine, I'm not 100% sure on that question. Could you retype that? Or does anyone, Steph, Shelley, Chris, do you understand that question?
I think if it's a purchase of goods and there's a cost associated with that specific purchase, I'm assuming that's what they mean, then yes, that's part of the purchasing of something. So I assume that would be okay. Chris, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so if I can just touch back on the previous question that you mentioned about the wages for the people delivering the services. Obviously, that's come up quite a few times regarding wages. So what I would say to people is, have a think about, if you were using other funding to cover the wages of those providers, what else could our fund be used for instead that would have longevity? So kind of look at, like, if you were to move your funds in different ways, what things could Lathology fund for you that are not wages?
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris and Shelley. Most of the women have, I'm just reading this from Law. What is your question here, Law? Without speaking the language, women are very isolated. We have volunteers. I'm assuming, Law Keeling, your question is about wages again, because you said you're running intensive summer school for refugees and asylum seekers. So just to let you know, we don't pay for staff wages, because I think that's your question from what I'm getting. Shona, what exactly does the fund cover? The website states funding application is for a specific part of project development or to buy specific things. Yes, in relation to your question, Shona, I don't know, Steph, if you just want to break, or anybody, or Shelley or Chris, we can talk about some of the things that we have given funding for to help you, but it doesn't, you're correct in saying it doesn't cover rent or accommodation or staff costs.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that we have covered, they're obviously on our website, so you can see it is real. We do obviously issue the money and everything, and we keep in touch with people that have wanted to get updates. So the very first one was a bike for somebody with disabilities so that they could join in riding. We have supported a training, I think it was a college with electrical drills, which were handheld ones. What am I looking the word for? Cordless, that's the word I'm looking for. Cordless drills. We then supported another charity that helped people with disabilities get them in the water, and it was their swimming aids. Who else have we supported? Obviously, Loch Gaelic Band, they had their music equipment. We've also supported another charity called, I think it was Big Dover, and they were helping people who were struggling in their area for food. But not only were they people could come in and get a carrier bag full for £5. They were actually teaching people then how to cook food and how to cost meals out and getting them a certificate and everything. So there's been a whole variety that we have supported. Does that help a bit? There's more information on the website.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. I just started to answer some of the questions below because there's a bit of repetition on some of the questions. So I've answered some of those below. The next question is Law, about 10 plus to take the kids on excursion. So Law, in effect, your question, yes. And in relation to how many grants we give, there's two 5,000 grants per a year at the moment. And I believe, Steph, you mentioned before at the call, because Laughology is going to be 20 years young next year,
Yeah.
there is a possibility that could be a one-off increase to whatever they decide, but at this time it's not concrete. Let me just see. I can see you fund salaries, but you fund sessional. But do you fund sessional workers who will be delivering the activity? Because it's salaries again, Helen, it would be a no to that. And Law, training for volunteers as well as supervision and travel costs. Chris or Shelley, would you like to answer that?
Sorry, Celine, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is from Law, and she's asking whether we would fund for training for the volunteers that are going to be working within the organisation. So the training for the volunteers and the travelling costs of them going to training.
I think, Steph, just correct me, in the past, we have looked at applications where trainers, the funding was potentially to cover trainers to have a qualification to continue to deliver training. But as long as it sort of doesn't sort of dip into salaries. So there's a bit of a line. So again, be very, very clear on that. I think generally what we tend to fund is the purchasing of something tangible, but it's not always like that. So it's about being very, very clear on what that money would then, how that money would benefit for the future.
Thank you, Shelley. And we've got a question here from Lisa, and she says, would applications from a local authority be considered? We are working closely with the community group to develop an offer of whole family support from a community centre family hub, or would an application need to come via the community group? Chris or Shelley, you just, sorry, yeah.
Hi, Chris, do you?
Yeah, so sorry, I got kicked out. Yeah, we've actually had a lot of applications on a very similar level to that, and community is absolutely at the heart of what the Happiness Fund is all about. So It sounds as if you're definitely along the right lines. So by all means, do put your application in, because that's very close to the values of Happiness Fund.
Nice, thank you, Chris and Shelley. We've got a question from Pascal. He runs a startup based in Nambia. Question, can a business be based in Africa, or specifically Nambia, to be considered? Steph, do you want to answer that? I'm not sure of the answer of that.
Oh, yes, it's never happened before.
No.
I think, but it's not 100% that it's UK based, but I am going to take that question back.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
That's a good
No.
question.
yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Pascal.
Yeah.
Rena says we don't yet have 12 months accounts. Does this matter? I'm going to open that up to anybody.
As far as I know, no, that doesn't matter.
Okay.
We obviously do some due diligence, and we will ask for bank account signatories. It has to go into a bank account in the name of your project or your community interest.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Steph. I believe some questions are already. Cass, our organisation as a whole is over £50,000, but operates as an individual project. Would we still need to apply for our smaller projects? Organisation as a whole is over 50,000. Has a turnover over 50,000, do you mean? Another dyslexic person here on the course, so it's taken me to go through the questions. I believe as we mentioned, it doesn't matter the size of the organisation, it's just dependent on what specifically you're doing with the funds.
Yeah.
Sessional costs for delivery. So again, this is for staff to be trained. Do you mean, Catherine? For staff members to be trained, or rather than to pay the wages of staff? So again, wages are not covered at all. But if you wanted to get staff, if you wanted to get your volunteers trained, for example, in first aid, that could be something that could be covered or be considered.
Yes.
correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
because then they could then, if they're being trained in first aid, if they're then going on to train other people, so they're becoming the trainer, then we can see where that money's going and it's ongoing.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. Steve has asked, can schools apply?
Yes.
Amazing. And then we do gardening and DIY. Would you pay for van costs for the van we use for our services? Fuel, for example? No, we wouldn't do that. No. Are you happy to part fund a project? Kate has asked this. Shelley or Chris, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had applications where it's part of a project, but the part of the project is again very specific, rather than if you're doing a massive renovation and you want some money towards that, that's probably not the kind of thing we're looking for. But if you said, as Chris said earlier, if you can tailor your application to say that as part of a bigger project, we'd like this bit funded that's very specific, then yes, we'd certainly take a look at that.
And just to give an example of that, again, just going back to Lindsay and Lochgelly, the first time Lindsay came to us with her pitch, that was very much specific. So it was part of an overall renovation, but they were, if I remember right, I'm testing my memory here, they were looking at converting or creating an accessible toilet area, and they were looking at things like their flooring and the washroom and things like that. So although it was part of a much bigger project for the community hall, it was very specific as to our overall project is going to cost X amount of money, but we're looking for this amount from you, and it's going to be spent on these things. So even if it is that our fund wouldn't cover all of what you're looking to do, just try and make it clear as to what that would go towards.
Thank you for that, Chris and Shelley. And I'm conscious of timing, and we are going to close in a second, but I've been scanning the questions and there's been a few repetition of the questions. So summarising what we've been discussing is clarity is the key. We don't pay for staffing costs. We're not paying for people's wages. It needs to be something specific. There are 2 funds every year of £5,000 that are paid to a charity or community interest company. It's not for profit, and it doesn't we can, it doesn't matter on the turnover of that organisation. So whether the organisation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steph, if the organisation, for example, has a turnover of 50,000 or even more, if you want the Happiness Fund to fund something specific, and you can provide a financial breakdown, as Lindsay from Loch Gelly Band mentioned, the funding was used for instruments for young people to help them have musical lessons and to continue playing within the community. So anything tangible that we can cover. Is there anything else that anyone would like to cover, add into what they've said, what I've added?
No, I think so. You've covered it. I think, yeah, be as specific as you can.
Yeah, I think just being specific as we can.
And I think we always do get asked when people say about wages, and then it turns into, can it be expenses? It's a no. It's wages, expenses, fuel, you know, so something that if you're just going to spend it once and it's gone, it's generally a no. And I don't know how many different ways we get forms in, or if we say we don't pay wages, then it comes back saying, oh, expenses. No, we just don't do it. Rent, accommodation, mortgages, all that sort of thing. No.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And Reno, I can see you've got your hand up. Just because we're coming to an end, I would say you can email us if you've got a specific question, but if you're filling out the application form, fill it out to the best of your ability. Be really clear, and we look forward to reading your applications. Take care, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was brilliant. Thank you
Yes, thank you, Lindsay.
for joining us. Bye.